Hello guys, today I'm out here in sub-zero temperatures to kind of go over my method for keeping warm. This really kind of became important to me when I was a lifty, which is somebody who just operates a chairlift at a ski resort. There's a little ski place near me here called Ski Sundown, and I used to work the chair there. It was a great job because you help people on the chair, you get to talk to people. If you don't like them, they're gone in 5 seconds. If you do like them, usually they'll come back around. But a lot of times we were out there at night because they have night skiing, and you'd just be standing there out in the open, you know, and if there's nobody coming through, especially on these really cold nights, we're just standing there watching the bull wheel go around. So that was when I first started getting into figuring out how to keep warm while standing still and just being out in the cold in general. Then working the night shift out on the railroad, you know, you have the wind just echoing down those corridors, you know, where it's straight because they've carved out the area for the rails, and it can be very, very challenging to keep warm. It's very difficult, but with the help of some research and some trial and error, I've come up with a pretty good system. It's not my system by any means. As a matter of fact, I think the military probably has the best system out there, but this is what's worked for me. Everything that I'm going to talk about will be listed in the description below, so if you want to go check out any of it, you can. If I can find it, some of this stuff I've had for a while. So let's start from the beginning. The base layer. The base layer's job is to get moisture away from your skin. As we've talked about before, moisture is the enemy of your skin, especially when it comes to keeping warm. So you want to get that away from you, because the problem is, especially when it comes to periods of exertion and rest, when you're exerting yourself, you're sweating, when you're resting, that moisture basically turns to ice crystals against your body. And what you want to do is get that away as quickly as possible. It's very, very hard to keep something warm when it's wet. It just boils down to keeping yourself dry. So for a base layer, what you're gonna wanna do is get a thin layer that moisture wicks. So that could be a synthetic. Synthetics actually work great. They're pretty inexpensive. And the only real downside to a synthetic when it comes to a base layer is that they start to smell pretty quickly. I mean, after a day of wearing one, they kind of start to smell like a locker room. It's not very good. So in a pinch, they work just fine. I do have some synthetic base layers that work just fine. They're cheap, and they do the job, so it's hard to argue with that. Now, another option in a pinch is cotton. So we're talking about those thermal Henleys you might wear, long underwear that's 100% cotton. It can work, but unfortunately, cotton has to be very thick for it to have any kind of really decent insulating properties. The other problem is that it tends to soak in moisture rather than wick it away. So it can work in a pinch, and especially when you're layering things on top of one another, the thicker the better when it comes to cotton. Unfortunately, when it gets really cold, you get to a point where you're totally inhibited and you can't move around. And when you're working outside or anything like that, you just don't want that. So cotton, in my opinion, is probably the last resort. Now, another option is silk, and whew, wind's starting to pick up. This is something that any woman who's worn silk stockings can tell you, that they actually do a great job of keeping you warm. As a matter of fact, they may even be too warm. So silk is great if you're gonna be outside all day. However, if you're transitioning from the office to the field or anything like that, indoors to outdoors, indoors they may actually be too warm. So for the best option out there, again, it's gonna be no surprise, I think wool beats them all. Wool is antimicrobial, it's warm when it gets wet, it's soft, it's very, very durable, especially compared to cotton. If you want to see a video on that, I did my cotton versus wool video, which I'll link to above. And really, a good thin layer of merino wool is almost unbeatable. In my opinion, that is the holy grail. Now, as far as base layers that I actually have a couple. One of the throwaways that I got at like Target is 32-degree heat. These are a very thin base layer. They actually do a pretty good job, especially when you don't know where you're gonna be during the day, but you want a little bit more insulation. They work just fine. They almost look like a spandex or yoga pant kind of thing. So I wouldn't recommend wearing them by themselves out there, but you know, they do a good job. Another pair that I really like, I actually got from Cabela's, and what this does is it sort of tapers down from really, really warm around your thigh area to a little bit less insulation around your knees, and finally down to basically a very, it's freezing out here. Just so you know, I checked, it's about, with the wind chill out here, about 15 below. So, and actually, as you can tell, I'm pretty comfortable. My face is getting a little bit cold, but because I layered properly, I mean, you know, I wouldn't want to spend all day out here, but it's not too bad. So anyway, I got them from Cabela's. They're really decent, and they taper down from very thick around your thighs and your butt to your knees, which is a little bit thinner, down to where your boots will go, which is the thinnest. And I actually like those a lot because of that tapering. They're not just thick the whole way. They work very, very well. Now, up next is the mid layer. The mid layer's job is to insulate your body. So what this is gonna do is this is actually gonna trap all of that hot air that comes from you. So the air that you're giving off, you wanna keep it against your body. You don't want it to escape, because that's just BTUs and calories that you're burning that you just, you don't want to be doing. You want it to be as efficient as possible. So the insulating layer, in my opinion, the best material for this is a high loft fleece, like this one that I have on right here. This is from Mountain Hardware. This is a few generations old. I know they have different ones out there. This was called the Monkey Man. I'm not sure if they make it anymore, but I know Patagonia, North Face, Arc'teryx. Arc'teryx actually has a really good one. It used to be called the Hercules, then it was called the Hylas. Very nice, high loft, high pile fleece. The higher the loft, in other words, the thicker and fuzzier it is, the more air is gonna get trapped in there, and it's just the best thing for you. So I like it a lot because it's lightweight, it dries out really, really quickly, and it's relatively inexpensive, especially when compared to wool. I mean, it can be pretty affordable. So you could get a nice, decent mid layer for pretty cheap. I'll put a couple of my favorite picks again below in the description, but other mid layers that you could use cotton for this, but of course you have all the drawbacks of cotton, which kind of sucks. One of the other ones that I really like is actually, I'm doing testing. I have my thermometer out here just to see how cold it is. One of the other ones that I really like, this is the Milwaukee Jacket, which is powered by a 12-volt battery. The nice thing about this is it has two zones, one in the chest, one in the pockets, and you could actually run them at 3 different temperatures. Each one could be running at a different temperature simultaneously. So if you want the upper part a little bit warmer than the lower part, you can do that, turn one on, turn one off, whatever you want. And this works really well. Another thing that I want to note is any of these mid layers can be worn by themselves. I've worn this Monkey Man jacket or mid layer by itself plenty in the fall and in the spring. It works really, really well, just as this does. And as you can tell, it actually has a nice durable exterior here, almost like a hard shell kind of thing. So it works really well on its own, totally. But when you layer this underneath something that's on top of it, it really does a great job, and it actually supplements your body heat with the electric heat that's produced by the battery pack. This actually works really, really well. I'm very impressed with this jacket overall. There's a few things that I would change. A full review of this is coming up soon. Another option, and probably the best one when it comes to really keeping warm, is down. Now, down comes in synthetic and it comes in natural goose down. And the whole idea is you have to figure out what you're going to be using it for. If you're going to be going out in inclement weather and it might rain, you might be caught in, that kind of element, then you're going to want to go with synthetic down. Synthetic down is not as warm as natural down. Real goose down is the warmest thing around there. I mean, it is just wonderful to have on. Anybody who has had a goose down comforter, or if you have a good goose down parka, you know how warm this stuff is. It's awesome. Hey, if it keeps the birds warm, then So this right here, I've actually showed this to you before. This is the Carhartt something vest. I can't remember. Now this Carhartt vest I actually had on my gift guide, and it's one of my favorite pieces to layer with, because you put this on underneath something, even like that jacket there, and it works perfectly. I love vests for that reason, especially a thin one like this, because they don't restrict your movement. They keep your core insulated, and they're very, very lightweight. This is just a wonderful piece. Again, it could be worn by itself when it's a little bit warmer out, which hopefully it will be soon. So goose down is much warmer. Problem is when it gets wet, it just does not retain any kind of insulation. Synthetic down works, not as warm, but it will retain that nice warmth and insulation. Wool is another great insulator, so you get something thick, even like this Mackinaw wool here. I couldn't imagine really using something like this, as burly as it is, as a mid layer, but I suppose you could. You want to stick with those kind of things. Cotton, again, it'll get wet. In a pinch, go ahead, throw on a hoodie over your base layer and underneath the top layer. If it's not that cold out, you really won't have to worry. All those things will work, but fleece, down, wool, those are my favorites. Now, when it comes to your top layer's job is to keep the elements out and your heat in. So that means that if it's raining, snowing, sleeting, really, really windy, you want something that's gonna cut right through all that stuff. So what I'm wearing right here, this is the Filson Mackinaw Cruiser. And the nice thing about this is that it's a thick enough wool that it does a great job of insulating you from the outside. It's not really what I would call technically a great outer piece because it doesn't do anything against the rain, the snow. You can kind of brush off it, but it's really kind of a better mid layer, or if it's not really going to do anything out, it's a great outer layer. I like it a lot. I wear this thing all the time if it's not going to be raining, if it's not going to be snowing, or if it's not going to be particularly windy, because it doesn't do a great job of protecting against that. But if you're looking at a day like today where it's clear and there's a little bit of a wind, but not really like too much, it works really, really well. As I said, I'm sitting here in below zero and I'm actually quite comfortable. Not bad at all. However, if you want to step it up, you can get outer layers with or without insulation. So this would be kind of considered an insulating layer. One of my favorites when it comes to a layer that is not insulating, this is the Arc'teryx Alpha jacket. Now I'm sure it's making a ton of noise. The nice thing about this is it's Gore-Tex. Now the nice thing about Gore-Tex is it allows you to breathe, so your skin can breathe, so you're not trapping everything in there, because that can be a problem too. So if you go with something like even like a rain shell that's not made out of Gore-Tex or not made out of something that will breathe, you could have the same problem where you actually start seeing some condensation on the inside. I've had that happen. It's not pretty. That's why Gore-Tex is so expensive though, is that it has that property, being able to breathe, but it also keeps rain and wind out. This thing is one of the best out there, the best that I've tested. This is my favorite. And again, there's absolutely no insulation at all. All you're looking at right here is Gore-Tex with a DWR coating, and that's all there is to it. When it gets really, really cold, however, you're gonna wanna go with something that is insulating. So for that, you can't beat a good down parka. This one here is from the North Face. And it has that same kind of DWR coating on the outside. It's a little bit more rigid, a little bit more durable, has, you know, pockets on there. This is the kind of stuff that you'll see explorers wearing, that you see down in the Antarctic, and they're wearing those big, like, you know, Canada Goose, excursion kind of things. I don't need anything like that. Chances are you don't either, but that's kind of where the idea comes from. So goose down on the inside here. This was a very expensive jacket, but it does a great job. Removable hood, and this actually has the coyote trim that you can remove. I took it off there. I'm just not into that. The idea though behind that coyote trim, if you've ever seen that, is to create a negative airspace in front of your face. So when the wind goes blowing across your face, it doesn't quite freeze just as bad unless you're direct on into it. So that's the idea behind the coyote lining. But a good parka like this that comes down below your butt is gonna do wonders when it comes to keeping you warm. Now, the issue that I found is out on the job site, you can't really wear that stuff because it's not high vis. I actually found a great company called Refrigerwear, and Refrigerwear has their Extreme series, which is this guy right here. Now again, same kind of thing. Exterior will repel water, wind, all that stuff. This has a couple of neat little tricks to it though. The inside has this reflective material. Now the problem is that this is definitely all synthetic. You can feel that it's synthetic because it doesn't breathe, and sometimes you get that moisture that you can just kind of feel pooling up. But again, you know, you get what you pay for. The idea behind this reflective material though is to reflect your body heat back to you, and you'll see that in a couple of other items out there. This also has a sort of belt that you can buckle around your waist, which keeps all of the hot air up here. All my hot air comes up my mouth, but you know, that's the idea behind that. Refrigerwear, it says good to -60. If it's -60, I'm not going outside. You're out of your mind, no way. So if anybody's actually tested that down to -60, I'd like to know about it, but I don't see myself ever doing anything like that. Okay, so the other things we have to talk about your accessories, which mean hat, gloves, boots, things to keep your face warm. So my favorite thing to use is mittens. Mittens are, as far as keeping you warm, the best thing that there is, because it keeps your fingers together. And the idea behind that is that there's actually, when you wear gloves which separate your, Jesus. So the reason that mittens are actually warmer than gloves is because it keeps your fingers together. When your fingers are apart, and these are cool because they actually have wool liners to them. These are made by Gary Glove. Again, I'll link them in the description below, but when you have your fingers exposed like that, the surface area that's around each of your fingers is conducting heat or cold, whatever, basically back. It's essentially sucking all of that heat out of your hand. When your fingers are together in one unit, the only surface area that's there is on the outside there, not between your fingers. So it actually keeps you warmer. These also have these really cool steer hide mittens that you could put over the top of them. If you want to wear each part separately, you could, but these are actually made by the same company that makes the Army's wool gloves. So that's kind of neat. But I treated these these steer hide here with some snow seals so I could actually use them. I use them all the time to stack wood, to go and, you know, snow blow and stuff like that. My hands right now are actually very, very warm. This is just fine. So those are a great option. But of course you lose out on dexterity with the mittens, so you don't have any ability to do anything like that. And especially in today's world with smartphones, it's something that you need to do. So even when I'm working out there and I need to use a tablet, if it doesn't freeze up, it can be kind of tricky. So for that, there are plenty of companies who offer these. These are from the North Face, same kind of deal here. But a thicker glove is really, really nice, and a lot of these have the ability so you can actually tap away on your phone and text somebody, although with the thumb that big, you know, with all the insulation on the outside, it's really hard to get any kind of accuracy. So most of the time what I text kind of goes through as a jumbled, tangled mess. It's not really that great. So let's talk about a couple of the other accessories so I can get the hell out of here. Good head covering. So what I'm wearing right here, this is the Filson Mackinac hat, which is great. Love it, and it's wonderful. The problem is that it doesn't do much to protect your ears. So for that, a regular old knit cap, again, preferably wool, although there are some great synthetics out there. This is another North Face. It has an interior headband right there, which adds just a little bit more of an insulator around your ears. You can kind of pull it down like that. The other problem though is now my face is exposed, and my face is getting pretty cold, especially with the wind coming at me like this. So one of the best things to do for that is get either a balaclava or something like this, which is just basically a head covering. Now, the cool thing about this is that you can actually tuck it down into your layers and you don't have to worry about it. You can actually put the hat on top of that, and then you have another layer. So this works really well. It also has the thing you can bring up like this, and you can use to keep your mouth and all that stuff. The problem that I've always found is that you get moisture building up here. So they have ones which have breathing holes and a spot for your nose so you can actually breathe through it. Works pretty well. This is really nice, especially under a hard hat. The other thing that I've gotten recently is this right here. Now this is by Stormy Cromer. It's a nice thick, when you put it around like this, you can use it either on your mouth like this, pull it up over your nose if you want, or if it's just not that cold, put it here. So you can use a scarf if you want to around your neck. You could use something like this. You could use basically anything. Even the buffs work really well, which is basically a circular piece of cloth. All right, guys, I'm gonna wrap this up. Socks. You wanna make sure that you have nice wool socks and change them out halfway through the day. If you have to go out for a full day, it's worth changing out your socks. The reason is because when your socks actually get saturated with your sweat, as we know, your feet have more sweat glands than any other part of your body, they become cold. Just changing out your socks at lunchtime for a fresh pair really makes all the difference in keeping you warm. So I've always recommended bringing 2 pairs of socks and switching them out during the day. The other thing is, and this is the last thing we're gonna touch on, is footwear. It's hard to wear your same footwear that you wear in the summertime in the wintertime, so it's good to find a dedicated pair of cold weather boots. And for those, I recommend any kind of boot which has a removable interior lining. I like the Baffin Apex Extremes. They're really not the greatest boot when it comes to leather and all that stuff, but I've never had a warmer boot on my foot. Again, the interior comes out so you can dry them, keeping moisture out of the equation. That's the biggest thing. And the Baffin Apex Extremes are great. They actually have that same reflective material along the footbed to reflect your heat back to you and insulate you from that freezing ground. The last thing that you could do if you want to is you can get a pair of alpaca insoles for the bottom of your shoe. So I've actually used these too. They do a great job. It's almost like putting a sweater on underneath your foot. They work really, really well.